One fell down and broke his head. Toastmaster for the day, ladies and gentlemen. I remember that day very, very vividly. It was the 16th of February in the year 2018. A rather gloomy day. Cats and dogs were fighting on which to come first, whether it was the lightning or whether it was the thunder. It was downpouring, the roads were flooded, and it was dead night. And my father's phone starts ringing. Ting ting, ting ting. And that was his very good friend Akmal uncle. And Akmal uncle takes the phone and says, Sheriffu, how about the boys' results? And hearing that very word, R-E-S-U-L-T, that 6-letter word, I, a very innocent 16-year-old, froze. And before I could make the next move, my mom came running from the very end of the house. Hooray! This boy has got 9 straight A's. Okay, good. I worked for it. I knew I would get 9 A's, nothing special. But what was special, ladies and gentlemen, was what is to happen after that. Number 1, my mother came. Number 2, my grandmother came. Guess what she said? Uta! Next engineer, I see. Then the next was a WhatsApp message from my uncle who lives on the other side of the planet. 9 A's. Another candidate for Moratua. And then my other aunt comes and says, you will make a good suitor. Another engineer, I suppose. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, things were quite clear. I had no choice but to choose maths for my A-levels. But wait, I'll give you some background as to who I was. You see, my grandfather was an engineer, my father was an engineer, all his siblings were engineers, all my mother's siblings were engineers, and all of their kids were engineers. And technically, we had already 28 engineers living on the surface of the planet by the time these results came. So, what my parents wanted me to become was to be the 29th. Now, there's a small problem there. I never liked this maths. Although I got an A for that particular subject, I never liked maths, the big things, drawing graphs. You know, ladies and gentlemen, my graph, the parabolic curve, will never come straight. I will never get 15 out of 15 for that. And that was the maths I was. So I needed to do something very different. And this different, ladies and gentlemen, I stepped out. And I wanted to do this fancy subject for A-levels, biology. I fought. My parents initially gave an assistance, but at the end of the day, they too gave up. And then after 2 years, yet another result, and that also on a very gloomy day, but this time, that fancy subject didn't turn out to be an A. It turned out to be a B. So just imagine my situation. That same uncle, that same aunt, and that same grandmother all came. This time, very happy. But ladies and gentlemen, that happiness, although I had a B for that one particular subject, I still qualified myself to hold this. Ladies and gentlemen, I qualified myself to enter a very prestigious medical faculty in this country. And from then, ladies and gentlemen, it was where you move in life. And that was when people asked me, Sheriffu Sheriffu, why no? So before I give you the answer to that question, we'll move forward further in life. So right after our first MBBS examination, we had this very long leave. My friends went tripping, my friends were out in the sun bathing, and they were having the best time of their life. Well, me, I decided to go to a country I never knew. I decided to go to a place that was completely new to me. For what? Just to do something called elective. So ladies and gentlemen, I entered this country that was rich in camels, rich in oils, rich in the sun. A country where you can literally burn an omelette on your car. For what? To teach physics for 2 months. I went on an elective to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for 2 months. And ladies and gentlemen, these 2 months, I had resistance from my parents, I had resistance from my aunt, and I had resistance from my own colleagues. But still, ladies and gentlemen, that 2 months, that 60 days of my life were the real eye-opening days of my life, ladies and gentlemen. I moved out from the very box that tried to confine me. And I moved out, and still the people ask me, Sheriffu, Sheriffu, why now? Ladies and gentlemen, this is life. People ask you, why, when, what, how? But they themselves don't give us the question. Life is not monotonous. Life is never that same path that you take in life. It always has its up, it always has its down. You have to go up and you have to go down. See, there's no point in writing the answer for the same question 100 times in life. You have to be creative, you have to be innovative, and you have to think out of the box. And that is exactly what, ladies and gentlemen, I did. It may be choosing that fancy subject way back in 2018. Or it may be trying to do an elective when the entire batch was sleeping at home. At the end of the day, I broke out. You really don't need to remember, and you really don't need to follow the preset rules what people have put forward to you. Just explore. The entire world is for you. And just like the phoenix, you rise up. No one is there to stop you. Mama called the doctor, and the doctor said, no more monkeys jumping on the bed. 3 little monkeys jumping on the bed. One fell down and broke his head. Mama called the doctor, but this time the doctor said, get more monkeys jumping on that bed. Ladies and gentlemen, you and I have to be that monkey. Jump on that bed, jump on that bed, jump on that bed, and fall down, but that fall will be worth it. Over to you, Toastmaster.